All right, good morning all. Here is the weekly review that I had promised from 7-8, 7-9, 7-10, and 7-11. We have a quick quiz scheduled today, so just wanted to go over some of the topics to make sure that you do well on your quiz. First thing that we talked about really is what decimals look like, and speaking decimal is just as important. So if you hear, let's say that I have 8 out of 100 jelly beans. Well, that would be 8 hundredths. Well, 8 hundredths. Let's talk about our decimals first. If our decimal is right here, this first place value in decimals is the tenths. The next place would be the hundredths. Now, if I'm talking about 8 out of 100 jelly beans, 8 100ths. If you remember back from our last video, when you hear the word hundredth, you know that this 8 is going to be in the hundredths place. So now let's show what the 800th would look like as a decimal. Our 8 is in the hundredths place. 8 hundredths is the same as 8 over 100. And that was a big part of last week, is being able to show how to write these decimals as fractions and these fractions as decimals. If we had to practice once more, if we had 7 tenths, or if we had 34 hundredths, or we have, let's say, 9 hundredths. Well, let's write all of these as decimals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw an arrow straight down to show how these are going together. These values, boys and girls, are the exact same. These numbers written as decimals and fractions have the exact same value. Let's start with 7 tenths. Since these bottom numbers are going to be giving away what these decimals look like, let's circle them so we can focus on that. Now, 7 tenths. If we go back up here, we see that the tenth is our first place value after the decimal. We're going to just draw that 7. We're going to just draw that 34, and we're just going to draw 9. Now, if I wanted to put in a decimal, and I put it right there, well, now that reads exactly as 7 tenths, because this 7 is in the tenths place. If I put a decimal in front of 34, since the last digit is in the hundredths place, this can be read as 34 hundredths. But now we have 9 hundredths. This one is a little bit different. The 9 must go into the hundredths place. That means that we'd have to put one more place in front of that 9 in the tenths. We're going to use a 0 there. And that would be how we'd write 9 hundredths. So speaking and writing decimals was a big part of last week, and making sure that we can do both is going to be great practice, and will also show if you do well on your quiz. So that was the first part, was writing and really speaking decimals. The next part that they talked about a lot of was comparing those decimals. Now, some of these can be a little bit tricky. For example, let's say they have some blue still on this one. I'm going to get rid of it. Let's say that we have the decimal 35 hundredths, and we're asked to compare that to 4 tenths. Now, I'm sure everybody will say, well, Mr. Schneider, 35 is much bigger than 4, therefore 35 hundredths is bigger than 4. But there was another rule that we talked about last week. There was a rule with zeros. Now remember, after the decimal, after the digit, I can put as many zeros here as I want. If this is a 3-digit decimal and this is a 3-digit decimal, now which one do you think looks bigger with the zeros? Well, that's what I would say too, is the 400. Think about it like money. If we had 35 cents, going back to our 4 tenths, 4 out of 10 dimes would be 40 cents. Which one's bigger? 40 hundredths. Therefore, we know that if we were going to compare 35 hundredths to 4 tenths, that 4 tenths is larger. Remember the zeros, boys and girls. One thing that always helped me when I was young is I would say, all right, this number goes into the hundredths. I want to make sure the number I'm comparing it goes into the hundredths. So if I can add a 0 to match, that usually shows which is the bigger number. Now, these just show decimals that are part of a whole. Now, what if you have a whole and you have to then compare that to a whole number and a decimal. Now let's say we had 2 and 2/10, and we want to compare 2 and 2/10 to 2 and 25/100. Now, again, this just helped me. It's not something you have to do, but it might help. You have a decimal that's in the hundredths. This decimal only goes to the tenths. Now, if I wanted to match, I could put a 0 in right behind this 20, or this 2 to make it 20, excuse me. Now, if you had $2.20 and $2.25, which fraction is bigger? Or which dollar number is bigger? $2.25. So if you're able to add that 0, that just might help. Now, there's also ones that they go into the thousands. Let's say that you have 908 thousandths. The reason this is thousandths is because this last place here is the thousandths place. You always say the place value of the last digit. Let's compare 908 thousandths to 910 thousandths. Just looking at these numbers once more, which number looks bigger, being that they are both 3-digit decimals? I would say 910 is larger than 908, since this is the larger number. If it's the larger number, it means it is closer to being a whole number. Now, each of these things that I showed you this morning is very similar to what is going to be on your quiz today, so I wish you very good luck. If you have questions, please reach out to your teacher, and have a great, great Monday.